The conception of the band started with it was me and Brandon in 8th grade science class. We were looking around the room. This is when kids start doing clubs and stuff that get them scholarships from their own club. And it was supposed to be like a street team protesting pop culture. Poorly conceived. There's no real point. But we ended up calling it mutilation of pop culture. My lack of trying to call it mutiny. Really, yeah. But it wasn't until that a little later in that semester, the 8th grade talent show was coming out. Oh, we should be a band. Brandon took drum lessons and I owned a guitar. Totally do this. I had a friend Merkel who played bass. And since that horrible event, moved on to great musicians. But we decided we were going to cover Self-Esteem. And the math teacher, kind of hated it. Had the nuts to look us in the eyes after our audition and tell us we'll never make it. So, then we went into freshman year and Brandon was like, my friend plays guitar, my friend sings, so we had Travis and John. Travis knew Stecker. Stecker had just started fiddling around with bass. Had a lot more band experience. Yeah.
Well, first it started off with John, Ketchup, me, Brandon, and Travis.
At the time, Brandon and I, we were more concerned with frivolous band rivalries and coming up with logos like the Epic O. It's kind of classic, it really is. By about the end of the year, we managed to get our shit together on MySpace. We had over 100 likes. Record live at a church, which is, we'd written a bunch of half-ass songs and booked a show at the Rock and Roll Grill, which was on par with everything else we were doing.
It was just typically this shitty venue in a basement where the only PA was literally just microphones, and that's a pretty familiar setup for most people. The floor was broken in from the band the night before. Bricks in the background, support beams were in the way of the stage, off inside obviously, but and then it was just that first show where we all just were okay, I kind of know what I'm doing. Fuck it, we're here. And it didn't exactly go off without a hitch. Travis was playing guitar with shit. Kept me down in the hard trying to figure out how my amp worked, because it was a brief tutorial, the 5 minutes before the set. John didn't know the lyrics. I don't think John knew the lyrics. He was read on paper. I was borrowing a bass cap from Brandon that he had, and it was an old PD because I didn't have my own bass cap at the time. And that thing would get massive feedback if I ran a distortion pedal through it. At the time, I thought basses needed distortion. So yeah, that was giving mad feedback, and we were all just trying to go through it confidently. It was pretty hard, but ultimately, it was an experience I'm pretty sure I know I don't regret, and I'm pretty sure no one else does for that matter. Ketchup being the only original member aside from myself for that show. And it was one of those things where it was rough, but for whatever reason we just were that sucked, let's do it again.
Well, I was just a fan, and they were just friends. And we were all going through, I guess our high school band phase. And I was always kind of the one that was left out, because I played the drums, but was never really good enough for in a band, or was never part of the whole band phase. But I was only part of it as a fan. So from my dipshit high school brain at the time, I enjoyed just kind of doing one of the shows.
It wasn't until after that show that we got the reality check. And we booked so far in advance, we booked 2 shows within a month at that same venue in both recordings. making peanut butter honey sandwiches and drinking cherry lemon lime. And that was the most amount of effort we put into rehearsing.
Everyone wanted to do a show, and the funny thing was, is like no one was really given a thought about having a set list or material. And so a lot of those first songs that I don't think a lot of people will hear or have heard, probably don't care about, were the songs we played. It kind of started off as like this punk, sort of pop punk sort of thing. It sounded kind of set. You can kind of tell none of us really knew who we were at the time, give or take, but
we were a band who insisted that if it made sense, don't do it. Which is probably why it took us 8 years to come out with 2.5 albums.
And it felt a little bit better, and that's how every show kind of built up. Every show, it never felt worse. It was like, you know, like everything just started coming together a little bit stronger, a little bit better, a little bit tighter. And for whatever reason, if we go back to any of those shows, they all suck. But at the time, I guess it all matters at the time.
You know, whether the music was good or not, because it evidently it has to be, so it's not. You know, I always had a good time. Just going out, hanging out with friends, not doing drugs, you know, not drinking, just that whole like camaraderie, you know, like fuck yeah, dude, keep that show, and everyone's feeling good. You know, made $20 from a show and bought fucking 20 McDoubles from McDonald's. That's what it was all about. Those were the good days.
I remember talking to Brandon and going, man, it's really easy to be in a band. Famous. This is easy.
Everyone thought they knew how to play their instruments.
Before long, Stecker got sick of our shit and dipped out to do like Flyleaf cover bands or something called Diff Missouri.
I was kind of like at a point where like I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. There's a lot of bullshit was going to be in the band.
Why?
I didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
So we were like, whoa, where's the guy we know who owns the bass? we got Fluffy to join. We did the Oriental show. We headlined, so it was empty. We had a great time backstage. Disrupted every other band set, and ultimately didn't think we were ever playing there again.
Technically, I've been like the temporary member ever since. That's actually how it happened. Now that I think about it, because they're like, hey, we need a bass player to like record and like for this band, and I've been technically the temporary member still, like 2008, 2009. Complicated because it was like one of those weird things. I just ran into both Ketchup and
It was great.
at the time, and like it just for whatever reason it just felt right. Really can't describe it because there's really no good way to put it right now because it just was one of those things. They showed up and they were talking about it, and it was just like, this is a good idea again. Maybe it's just like talking to like something you regretted. I don't know, but yeah, that's just how I ended up. And then like seriously, that's basically how I got back in the band. But at that time, it's like that show I filled in for. That was when things actually started feeling right instead of just like goofiness. You know, certain members left the band, and then things actually started rolling again. Or actually started rolling, period. Basically, John was never able to come around to sing, so we were just becoming an instrumental band. And then Travis was getting into parties and stuff like that, and was never around. We never really kicked out either one of them. They just stopped showing up, and we just moved on without them. And that's how that worked out. But before then, we were like, we really do need a singer. And so then that's when we got Olbang, Eric Olbang. Not that it was like a bad thing on him, it just wasn't working out. You know, that's when we were back to square one. It was like one of those, well, crap, we need a singer. And then, you know, we were hanging out at a hookah bar, and that's when we met Squid. One of those things where we wanted to put on a good front and have like this positive image. And then we'd find like a video where he would be breaking like a skateboard shop board over like arbitrary reasons, and then put our band name in it, where, you know, we don't want to be represented like that, you know, where it's like you're gonna trash talk one company and then bump us at the same time. Whether or not we like that company, that's irrelevant. We don't want to be associated with that kind of publicity. And then we recorded our first demo with our old studio And that was when we kind of knew, I guess it's kind of go in this direction for a while. I mean, especially if we go later on, it was even when we found Mike at Plan 9 Studios, it was that way, and it worked out nicely.
And it was about then that Stecker and I were having the conversation, we could actually do this.
A point where we were having this disagreement with our drummer Brandon. At that point, all of our practice stuff was at his place, and you know, it was getting to the point where he never wanted to practice. Ever. And I do mean ever. And you know, for a band who actually wants to do stuff, go out there to a stage and play like, you know, empty shows for the fuck of it. Empty or full, you know, obviously you want to play full venue, that's every band's dream. But you know, if you just want to go out there and actually do something with it, he was never down with it. He'd always shoot down any idea and never have a good reason for it. At least that was how I interpreted it at the time. Now after all that happened, we met Maida, and then that's when we were talking to Jeff, recorded Pounding the Pavement with him, and it was like going off like a dream. We had a drummer that was, you know, working with us, showing up at shows, and we had a great time with him. Basically kind of left like a week before we were going to go on tour, and then that's how Chance joined us.
I pitied you guys. You were about to go on tour. You didn't have a drummer, so I took advantage of it because I wasn't doing a lot with my life.
Jeff was a guy who had no real musical experience, but was totally enthusiastic to be a part of it and actually give it his all. He was just at other shows rather than practicing for the ones that we want to play. It was where we were practicing without a singer again, and it kept making us ask the question, why do we really need a singer anymore? The way it worked out now is that, you know, Ketchup eventually just had to step up and said, fuck it, I'll do it. He, you know, it sounds like he's still trying to find himself, and he was like thrown into it, but he pulls it off really nicely. So,
my experience on the tour was a bittersweet experience, not for me, but I'm sure everyone else. Because 3 weeks in a van, you know, I could sleep wherever. I was cuddled up next to my drum set in this tight-ass van, which is roomy when it's empty, but pretty packed up when you have, like, at least a ton worth of fucking band gear in it. But anyways, my whole experience was actually pretty fucking sweet. I enjoyed just being on the open road, exploring the whole nothing that encompasses really most of the United States. Going through Kansas. I didn't think there was any place more boring than Kansas other than Montana. Doesn't happen to be. But anyways, in the end, 3 weeks in a van, and my feet happen to always smell pretty fucking bad. So, the whole time, you know, and I don't mind the way that my feet smell, but the whole time everyone else fucking hated it. Other than that, you know, I got a pretty good time just going around, jamming out, playing the drums at crazy obscure places I would have never imagined playing the drums at. In a band I just learned the songs to. So yeah, no, I mean, my whole encompassing of how I felt with the tour was pretty sweet. Pretty sweet. Pretty great.
We started at Brandon's house, and I mentioned previously how that went down. So then, out of like a fit of desperation, it was the Ketchup's garage to my garage, and it was, you know, really sucked. It wasn't insulated well, so it was hot in the summer, it was cold in the winter, and there was like 2 or 3 winters and summers where we put up with that. It's not so much that the elements themselves make it hard to practice when your fingers are freezing and really stiff, and you can't really focus on what you're trying to get out of that practice. It's a little distracting. But now, what's really cool is we moved into a space.
Garage Bay.
We moved into a space where it was given to us for free, ultimately. And it's spacious and it's insulated and everything we need right now.
Well, I never really recorded in a studio, to be completely honest. Any recordings I'd ever done were in, you know, like a friend's basement with shitty fucking microphones through a fucking crappy ass computer. So to actually like be in a semi-legitimate recording studio was actually pretty fulfilling. I like worried a lot because, you know, I'm not always really organized as far as my drum work goes. I kind of just play the drums to some bass pattern that I remember. But I was a little worried that, I'd mess up a lot and that fucking Mike, the guy who was the head of the studio, would get upset, fucking bash on me for, like not being well together or any of that. But, it was actually like a really, really easy, ended up nailing it, like the first one or, first or second track. So it was nice,
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of things are happening right now, actually. When I first joined on as the drummer, I wasn't worried necessarily about my creative input, more so as I was worried about being confined within a square box. Well, boxes are circles. But I was worried about being confined in a box as far as what I would be able to play and what I should play and what they wanted me to play. And that's kind of not the case, actually, because as it turns out, like, all three of us are putting in our own creative input and, like, kind of just turning it not necessarily into MOP-C or what we want it to sound like, but into something completely different. And it's actually pretty exciting. And
we're currently changing the band name to Flat Earth Space Program.
that was always, even in my stupid high school band phase, I always thought that was kind of a little bit of a silly name. Like, I understand as far as an acronym's perspective and just the fact that it was an acronym and referred to as MOP-C, mutilation of pop culture, that was cool as fuck when I was a stupid, edgy MySpace teenage kid, But as you kind of progress and mature and graduate high school, and now you're like 21 years old, and, 22, and you can fucking buy alcohol, and you're in a band called MOP-C, like, what does that really mean? What does that really mean? Think about it. Not mutilation of pop culture anymore, I'll tell you that. Maybe it's got something to do with mops. Don't you see? The name now is Flat Earth Space Program, and because... Fuck yeah, dude. I like the name because it's kind of like a fucking home run in the obscure field type of way, kind of thing. Like, you don't hear bands necessarily with that name. And it's not necessarily that like, oh, well, I've never heard a band, Flat Earth Space Program. It's more just, it's an interesting name, and it's not that it has to be edgy. It's not that it has to be like a name that catches on, or it has to be like fucking a challenging name, or a name even necessarily worth remembering. But it is a name that I feel describes the interests and the sound that we're kind of pushing for as far as the way that we're playing our music.
And ultimately, the number one goal is to just get the music to pay for itself. If our cost of recording and pressing CDs is consolidated by CDs we sell, we won. If we can get paid just enough to cover gas and lodging and food on a tour, then the tour was a success. And that's really just the ultimate goal, is to get the music to fund itself so that it's just fun.
We've just been kind of doing things whether people were available to help us out or not. I'm that butthole. Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden.
Sorry, it's fucking... I was putting this away. That's what
It's really... You was away, but you already missed it.
That's it.